Hello and welcome to the No Dig Norfolk Gardener's Postbag. Now, we put a question out there on the community channel of YouTube and also across the rest of our social media to say that we were thinking of making a video during this month where we can answer people's questions. I have to say we've been absolutely overwhelmed with the amount of questions that have been sent in, so thank you very much for that. Now, our first question comes from Lewis. And Lewis says, "Hi NDNG. I work with young children for my job and would like to know what are the easiest things to grow with them." I love the NDNG, Lewis, and hello, by the way. There are one or two people that when they send us messages they go NDNG. I guess No Dig Norfolk Gardener is quite a lot to type out, but we absolutely love it that you used that to message us. Now, what I would say, Lewis, is that I'm going to assume that you have an open piece of ground or a raised bed to grow things in. Because container gardening is a whole different concept, a good concept, and a lot of people can do it, and we hope to feature some container gardening on the channel as we go into next season. But for now, as I say, I'm going to assume that you're going to be growing in open ground and in raised beds. Now, myself and Mrs. W, I'm sure you've heard us reference, we have two lovely grandchildren and another one on the way. The two that are here and walking around with us, and they love coming into Nanny and Grandad's garden, we've found that the best things to grow with them are things like radish, lettuce, peas, beans, carrots, courgettes, and pumpkins. And some of the things are really good because they grow really quickly. So radishes, you know, from the time that you sow them, they can be ready to eat within 5 to 6 weeks. Fresh carrots, children absolutely adore. Now, they won't be ready in 4 to 5 weeks, but they will be ready somewhere around 10 to 12 weeks. And the great thing is that while they're growing, if you can buy a variety of seed that we used with our grandchildren, which was a seed called Rainbow Mix, the carrots come in many different colours. So when it does come time to pick them out of the ground, they'll never know exactly which colour they're going to get, and that makes it all the more fun. Now, as for peas and beans, they will need some kind of structure to grow up. The only caveat that I will put on that is that you can actually buy green beans, and sometimes referred to as Kenya beans or bush beans, and they do grow as a little bush in the ground, and you can just go around and harvest those as they appear. I'm sure if you're messaging us that you are a follower of our channel, you'll know that myself and Mrs. W grow climbing French beans and obviously climbing runner beans. And they do give you a much longer and bigger harvest than the bush ones. You'll need plenty of the bush plants in order to get a really good harvest. So if, like us, you're going to grow the climbing ones, as I say, you will need a structure. But the great thing is that they'll grow up things like a little wigwam. So if you buy 5 or 6 canes and stick those in the ground, tie them at the top into a little wigwam, you can grow some peas up there, and then when those peas are finished and you've had that harvest, you can take those out of the ground and you can plant your beans, whether they be runners, French beans, or both. Now, one of the great things that you can do with children is if you take things like plastic bottles, this is an old lemonade bottle that we've cut the top off, you can put some compost in it and then pop your seed in. In this case, it's runner beans. So things like runner beans and French beans, they're really good because they're large seed, so you can see what's happening. And we got your question a couple of 3 weeks back, so myself and Mrs. W just started this off. There's a bit more soil on the top here. I've just taken that off so that you can see what's going on, so that the camera can pick it up. But the great thing about doing this is if you pop the seed in there, you can actually see the roots going down, and you can see the stalk going up as to when it germinates. And you should be able to see just there where it's now germinating and pushing itself up. There's the other one. I don't know if you can see that from through the plastic bottle, because it is quite sunny. I don't know if the camera's going to pick it up. But you can see it through the plastic as it grows and becomes bigger. And I know our grandson in particular really loved that, and really enjoyed watching the seed actually germinate and send its roots down. And then he asked Nanny and Grandad if we had somewhere to plant it. And here it is. Now, he's had several harvests off this, and he's been very proud that his beans have been on our plates and we've all been eating them. You know, this is sort of September now. This is starting to come towards the end of its harvest, so I'm not going to harvest these now because he won't be happy if we've taken the harvest. He likes to do it himself. And we're really lucky in that he does come around see Nanny and Grandad quite often. We normally see him once every couple of weeks, sometimes a little bit more. And he will come pick his own beans. So yeah, that's Charlie's bean plant, and it all started off in that plastic bottle, just like you just saw, and it's really kept him engaged. I think every time he comes around here, can we put the garden? How's my bean doing? Have I got any beans, Nanny? Here he is. The other thing is that he's rather taken with Nanny's cucamelons that she's been growing, and he insisted that he had some cucamelons that were going to be grown. And here is his cucamelon plant. You can see he's got some on there. The flowers are still coming. So yeah, children can really get involved with gardening. They absolutely love it. And if you can just engage with them and do the things that we would naturally do in the garden, they just love to do it with you. Let's face it, it involves things like soil, water, two things that children really like. So our next question comes from Abby. Now, Abby asks, as summer will soon be finished, what do we have planted for the winter months? What veg will you be harvesting, and what jobs will you be doing? Thanks, Abby. That's a really good question, actually. And as with most gardens, they all need to evolve, and there's always jobs that need doing. And some jobs are the sort of jobs that you do need to do during the autumn-winter period when you're not so busy sowing seeds and planting out. For us being No Dig, one of the jobs that we will be doing over the autumn-winter period is, as final harvests are taken, we shall be spreading our compost over to ensure that next season's crops are well fed. We shall also be making a new strawberry bed. Now, I know that you are a subscriber, Abby, so you're probably well aware that we planted some new strawberry plants out where our soft fruit is, which seemed like a really great idea at the time because I was trying to be really efficient and use the space that was between the raspberries. But I have to report back that it's not quite worked as I would have hoped. So we need to do something different with that. The other thing that we want to do is to extend the bean tunnel. There's been some things that have worked really well with that, and some things that have not quite worked so well, and we are in the middle of making a video about that, so you'll be able to see the things that worked well and the things that didn't work well. You'll know that our polytunnel lost its roof. So one of the jobs that we do need to do, which will be done very imminently, is that we need to get a new roof on our polytunnel. I don't know if you can quite remember, but it seems a long time ago now, but last February, March time, myself and Mrs. W actually sowed some asparagus seed. And they've been going along really well, they're looking good. And so what we need to do now is to make our asparagus bed and ensure that that's all ready to receive those plants next year. So that's another job that we need to do. And then lastly, what we really want to be doing is to be making ourselves our own hot bin composter. And we'll have more to say on that as the year goes on. We did have a question, I think, I don't know if it was in the last video that we released or the one before, about composts, and had a bit to say within that comment. And I did say that there would be more to come about compost making as the next 12 months go by. So we're going to be busily doing that, but one of the projects for us is to make a hot bin composter. Now, as for things that we're going to harvest, well, you can see that I'm in front of the squash plants, and we are going to have the honey boot and the butternut. We've got curry squash, so they will go into storage and they will keep really well into next year, so that will be something we'll have to eat. Just to the left there we have some sprouts. We have plenty of sprouts. We do love sprouts in our family, so yep, they'll be available to eat. We've also got cauliflowers in the ground, cabbage, romanesco. We also have carrots, parsnips, calabres, purple sprouting broccoli, as well as swede and some pak choi that we're about to pop into the ground now. Also very soon coming on stream will be our leeks and our celeriac. But also there's the things that we harvest earlier in the year that are now in storage. And we have lots of potatoes. We also have shallots, onions and garlic. And then in the freezer, I know Mrs. W has already frozen many runner beans, French beans, peas, broad beans, as well as all the soft fruits that we've been collecting from earlier in the year and that we're still collecting now. It started with things like strawberries, raspberries, gooseberries. Obviously it's now blackberries and the autumn raspberries. So there are plenty of soft fruits in there that we can use in our cooking. However we wish to use them, it may be that we make some nice fruit wines. Oh, there may be a spoiler for a video that's coming up soon, Mrs. W. And with our carrots, if we have a harsh winter and we can't leave them in the ground, then we shall pull those up, and Mrs. W will also blanch those and get those into the freezer so that we will have carrots. Hope that answers your question, Abby, and thank you very much for that wonderful question. Now, next we move on to a question from Ken. Now, Ken asks, do you plan for your successional planting, or would you have various options ready to put out when the ground becomes free? I find having something ready to go quite challenging. Well, Ken, the answer to that really is yes and yes. So yes, we do have a plan to what we want to succeed the first crops we put in. But also yes, we have options as to when they will go into the ground. Now, as a quick example for you, and I hope this explains it really well, back in February this year, we sowed our calabres plants. And they went into the ground in March. And we know that they are due to harvest sometime in June. In May, we sowed what was to be their successional crop, which was going to be cabbage. Now, when it actually came to June, for whatever reason, calabres didn't all harvest at the same time, and we still had some left by mid to late June when we were due to go on holiday. So we couldn't just put those cabbage in. So what myself and Mrs. W did do, we then took those plants and we potted them on, just so that they would be kept going, knowing that by the time we came back from our holidays, we would be able to then harvest the final calabres, and then the ground would be ready for those plants to go in. And indeed, those cabbage plants, you see them quite often on here. You can't see them from here, but they're just over there. They're happily growing away, and they actually went into the ground the second week of July. So I hope that explained things before you can. There are actually one or two people out there that since myself and Mrs. W have been doing this successional planting, we get lots of questions about it. I think people get a bit daunted about it and a bit concerned about it when really you don't need to be that concerned. We know that, you know, most of the seeds that we sow are actually ready to pop out into the ground anywhere between 4 to 6 weeks. So long as you know when something is likely to harvest, you can sow that seed 4 to 6 weeks before you then need to pop it into the ground. And in most cases, the plants are really flexible, so if they've filled their module and you can't plant them yet, just pop them on into a slightly bigger pot until you can get them in the ground. Well, Hilary asks, "This sounds mad. I thought I would try something new, being inquisitive by nature. Having sown some tiger nuts, I realise I have no idea on when they will be ready to harvest or how you cook or eat them." And the second part of her question, she says, "Can you tell me the best time to harvest crops such as celeriac, which seems to take an age to do much? The ones in the shops are way bigger than mine. Am I too hasty?" So let's deal with the celeriac first, will we? And I've got to tell you, Hilary, you are talking to the king of hasty. You can see our celeriac here. They're looking really quite good, and probably much like yours. No, they're not as big as the ones that you get in the supermarket. Now, you don't need to stress yourself about that. I've seen many videos, particularly on YouTube, where people are absolutely obsessed with growing the biggest vegetable that they can grow. But let me tell you, Hilary, that whether it's this big or whether it's this big, it's going to taste amazing. In fact, the bigger something generally gets, usually the taste becomes a little bit weaker more than anything else. And I guess the reason why people do like to grow really large ones is for exhibition. They're probably going to enter into a show. But when it comes to people like the supermarkets, yes, they will look slightly bigger because A, you don't know what that farmer has fed them with. You don't know whether the seed has been modified so that it can grow really big celeriac. One of the things that myself and Mrs. W know is that these beds are fed actually with the plants you see growing now, because all of the trimmings and the waste that comes from all of these tops, they will all end up over there in that compost heap. Just about anything and everything that comes from this garden eventually goes on the compost heap and makes some lovely compost that will go on to feed our soil. Now, one thing that you can do, Hilary, is like us. It's September. September is the time of year when this is thinking about coming to a harvest. Yeah, it's not quite there yet. One of the rules that myself and Mrs. W do try to follow as best we can is that obviously water is a precious commodity. And if, like us, living here in Norfolk, we haven't seen much rain, so what we have in our water butts, we have to use the best we can. One of the best times to water any vegetable is when it's coming near to its harvest. So here where we are in Norfolk, these are going to, we would expect to harvest these sometime towards the end of October. And I would expect that to start to bulk up. And the way that we get to do that is by giving these water. Giving them water now, regularly, once a week, a good watering between now and the end of October, and that will help to bulk them up. Now to the other part of your question, which was about tiger nuts. Now, this is something that myself and Mrs. W don't have a huge amount of experience on, but we have heard of them because our parents would have been around at the time when these were really, really popular, so that knowledge will have been passed down to us. So tiger nuts are not actually really a nut, yet they are actually a root vegetable. And they were extremely popular during the war period, so the Second World War, and then post-Second World War period. And they are actually often used as sweets, because they are actually really quite sweet. Now with these plants, what you do is you plant them into a pot early spring, and you keep them in your greenhouse or your polytunnel, or at least under cover, so that no harsh frosts get them. And then once all danger of frost has passed and we've got some nice warm weather, you can then move that pot outside where they can grow on. Keep them well watered and they'll continue growing. They look like grasses actually. They keep growing just like grass. And you start to see the first frosts of autumn. That's the time to harvest tiger nuts. Now you can add them to your meals, you can add them to salads, they can be eaten as a sweet treat, they can even be put in to make lovely smoothies. That's how versatile they are. And actually, Hilary, I've got to say to you that you're bang on trend, because these tiger nuts actually were put out there this year to make a comeback. You know, they really have been. You can buy the plants from various garden centres for you to be able to use. Up until then, you haven't seen that. It'd be lovely, actually, if we get some seed from those as we go into next season or the season after, so that we can actually start to grow them from seed. That would be really wonderful. So let's see what they come up with. But you are bang on trend, and you've actually got myself and Mrs. W actually thinking that we might try some tiger nuts next year. But don't be fooled by the title. They are not nuts. That's the post bag for September. I've answered those questions to the best of my knowledge that I have. So hopefully that's going to help you guys out there. Please let us know down in the comments if you have any questions that you'd like to be answered on film. Or let us know in the community tab of our YouTube channel. So not long after you watch this, I'm going to put out on there that we're looking for the questions for the October post bag. And again, in the comments, do let us know what you think about the No Dig Norfolk Gardener's post bag. And if you'd like to see it carry on over the next 3 or 4 months, be interested to hear exactly what you do think. We shall see you next time.